Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Inspired in Hull podcast. It's been a glorious day on campus and we've been joined by BAFTA winning producer Neil Grant, who's just been speaking to some students and is now joining us for a chat. Neil.
Hi.
How have you enjoyed being back on campus today?
God, it's been a long time since I was in Hull and I've enjoyed every minute of it, to say the least. It brings back a lot of good memories for me and back in a different capacity, I suppose.
You've met a lot of students today, seen campus. Is there a lot different from your time as a student?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, I'm an old fogey now, even though I don't feel as if I am. But I suppose I am. I was here right back in the end of the 70s and did my first degree here, and my God, has this place changed, and all for the better. Oh no, really, and I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here interviewing me, but really, genuinely, all for the better, and to say the least, I've been kind of wowed by, I suppose, the range and the extent of new facilities. I don't want to sound as if I'm doing a PR stint for you, but nonetheless, it's genuinely how I feel. What a lot of difference since I was last here. But that was a while ago and things do change.
We'll clip that and send it to marketing for the PR. But yeah, you came to speak about your career today with students and hopefully inspire them. I certainly thought that it was an inspiring talk. You spoke with a lot of authenticity and passion about the work that you've done. Particularly some of the stuff around 9/11, the President's War Room, and True Detectives is really groundbreaking, interesting documentary. What's been the proudest thing that you've worked on in your career?
I suppose, I mean, I've done such a lot over the last 30 odd years.
It's Greg's, isn't it?
It's Greg's the Bakers.
Yeah.
You think so? Greg's More Than Meets the Pie. Thank you for reminding me of the title. Not necessarily. That was a bit of fun. But I suppose the one I'm most proud with creatively, and I did get the BAFTA for it, but there you go, just thought I'd say that, was The Murder Detectives. And the most controversial recently was is Labour Anti-Semitic that I did for Panorama. And I suppose the one that's also recently gave me some accolades, it's been a couple of years of nice accolades really, has been the 9/11 Inside the President's War Room. But not Greg's. I did that quite a while ago.
That's not the highlight of your career.
Well, and the sausage rolls, I've moved on from sausage rolls.
Did you get free sausage rolls?
Funnily enough, they did give me a bundle of sausage rolls one day, and that was after the sausage roll factory caught fire.
I was going to ask, the next question was about, because you've described yourself as a troublemaker, both as during your time as a student and also as a documentary maker. And
Yes.
obviously, your documentaries have at times caused a bit of a furore.
Yes.
As a troublemaker, you weren't responsible for that fire, were you?
Nicely put. Even though it gave me a great story to film, but no.
You did reference that earlier and said you were lucky.
Yeah, I was very lucky
that. Or were you an arsonist?
I was lucky that, in fact, somebody. I think it was us. No, it wasn't. It was an electrical fault on the main factory floor, and we were very, very lucky to get it because it gave us a nice little story and gave us a way upon which to put centre stage sausage rolls, as every good filmmaker should. But in getting to the answer to your question, is that am I a troublemaker? And you know what? I'm not as bolshy as perhaps as people make out. But more to the point is that I just want programs to make a difference, and I just kind of think that's why I went into media, albeit that I went in a rather indirect route, and sausage rolls was merely a byproduct of that.
Maybe we should discuss a little bit more of the trouble that you made when you were at university. Because we alluded to it earlier that perhaps that level of troublemaking and passion is not it's not delivered in the same way by students today, which is good actually, because the building that you occupied back when you were a student is actually where David and I work. So that would get rather awkward now if the students were to stage something similar. But because that's different to what students would encounter now, could you tell us a little bit about how that happened, what that experience was like?
Crumbs, in the mid-70s, we were kind of angry. Very angry, and quite rightly so. Is that university had its hand in the till with Barclays, and that was kind of a whole issue about disinvestment in South Africa, and we got very hot under the collar, and quite rightly so. And indeed, I have to admit, I was part and parcel of my fellow students who occupied the admin building here in Hull, and fond memories. It was about 2 weeks. It was, and it was fun that it was too, really, but also an important message. Can I just say an important message? But kind of beyond that, after the forces of law and order came in, and as well as the Vice Chancellor basically got us out eventually. I'm not sure what happened to our campaign though. Did they disinvest? I can't even remember.
No, I think it was successful, wasn't it?
Oh, there we go.
I think it was successful. Yeah.
Oh, quite right too. But there you go. But there you go. So it's kind of have some value.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's my opinion. I speak on behalf of nobody else, but I would say that campaign was entirely defensible. But I would still. Did you just stay in the building?
We did.
How many of you were there at any
Quite
one
a lot.
time?
There was about 50 of us that were there.
You just didn't leave at all.
And didn't leave at all. And a lot of sleeping bags, and a lot of
food?
Came in from student union. Yes, we did. We had, there were lots of cakes being cooked for us, and I remember. It was a fun, if not an important time.
What were the shower facilities like?
Not very good, because they went back. Students weren't always the unkempt, and indeed I wasn't. So I used to go for my showers and then nip back, which of course is what you did.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But it answers your question though. Is that are we now as angry as that? Well, I don't know. You tell me. Is Generation X as angry now?
I think we feel in the middle generation.
No, you're not Generation X.
So we don't speak on their behalf. But I think working on campus,
I think things have changed, haven't they? Because nowadays you've got social media, you've got different outlets for expressing anger. I suppose one of the things that people talk about today is cancel culture and sort of deplatforming people with a message. But obviously there's been a big sort of backlash against.
Do you know what though? I think that there's also something about students now is slightly different from my generation, is that students now have to find money to pay for their student loans, and they have to work. It's work. It's a different attitude.
Consumers now.
Consumers. And what's more is that I had a student loan. A full student loan, and now of course students have to find the means upon which to pay for their courses. They become customers, as well as I was a consumer really, yeah, that's right. And enjoyed the facilities that university provided, though I didn't have to put my hand in my pocket. I was not in the position whereby I could afford to do so, or at least my family weren't, and I got a full loan. But students now, of course, don't. And therefore their priorities may therefore change. They've got to find somewhere cheap to live, or have to find somewhere that they can afford to exist and pay for their studies. And so perhaps that has an impact upon their ability upon which to become more angrier on the streets and protests, and as if to say that what their protests were going to do is in fact get change. In terms of anti-pirate, we did, but beyond that, I do wonder. But there you go. But I guess I get older, perhaps, not as radical as I was once.
You've seen over the years, obviously life of students has changed. I suppose in your career the media has also changed with streaming, podcasting as well, obviously has sort of changed the way that people do factual reporting.
I think that you have to show now a greater versatility in the way in which you make your media accessible. People are often watching with 3 screens. I think that I have to cater my programmes that will have a life beyond that of terrestrial, for example. So if I do a programme for Channel 4, or I do it for BBC ITV or Channel 5, they're now thinking of what are their first windows to broadcast. Is it the first windows are going to be online? And in many respects it is going to be online. So what's the social media engagement? And there has to be a life beyond what was normally traditional telly. And that I have to be cognizant of, and the new generation of filmmakers will equally have to be cognizant of the new demands being made of them. It's all changing, and streaming has had a dual effect. Is that in one sense it provides a greater opportunity for documentarists and drama to have an opportunity to get their message across, but in another respect what it does is that it means that I'm not always certain that qualitatively you're getting the same sort of gig as you would otherwise get, because of course there's a mass market for documentary and for drama that needs to be satiated.
Have you sort of changed your approach to the way you tell stories to take into account the different way in which it might be broadcast?
I so hope not. Even though you might have thought I was going to say the opposite to that, is that, forgive me for sounding somewhat boring and predictable, but I am totally committed to public service broadcasting. I recognise the needs of a streaming community, but I'm not going to change the way upon which I would make my programmes as a consequence of meeting the demands of a streamer, which means then that I have to in some way change the way upon which I tell a story. By that I mean I have to have a bit of scandal in the first 10 minutes, or I have to have a resolution of what?
Clickbait.
Exactly right. And you know what? I kind of think, given the sort of telly that I make, which is based on factual storytelling and integrity of the story, I want to retain that integrity and trust that enables me to make those films in the first instance. Can you imagine if I said to George Bush, you know what, in Making of 9/11, and about 10 minutes in, I'm going to cut you and I'm going to hope that you're going to say something like this that enables me to do something like that makes it more sexy or more engaging, because of course it satiates the needs of my irrepressible viewer on a streamer. Well, no. Am I going to make it like a drama? No. I want to tell the story as factually accurately as I can, and I'm not going to make any compromises for that. And that's why my films, I hope, have integrity.
Does that reputation follow you? Are you known for that?
Yes, and I suppose so. And I get access to places that others wouldn't necessarily get. Because I've got a track record that is honourable to the institution, that gives me the access, and to the characters that are going to be central in terms of the storytelling that I ask to appear, if you like.
I respect that, and I think that's there's not.
Well, thank you for that.
I don't think everybody in your industry could say the same.
Well, I hope that there are a lot of my contemporaries that do, but there are some. I'm not totally driven by the pounds, shillings and shekels all the time. And I have to be fairly persuasive with commissioning editors to support a programme that doesn't necessarily always mean that I hit a more populist stream, if you like, or what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that programmes with integrity will enable you to get better access and better stories, rather than the opposite, sensationalism all the time. Yeah. And I'm not a sensationalist, though I like good stories.
That was one of the things that sort of stood out to me when we were watching clips from some of the documentaries that you made, and ahead of today watching some of your stuff online. They're really gripping and immediately arresting, and there's something about the storytelling and obviously the authenticity that shines through and immediately sort of grabs your attention. You've taken a different approach in every documentary that you've made. When do you start thinking about like the way that you're going to start presenting the information you've found in the form of a story?
I may well have the idea to tell a story in a particular way, and that may well be all great, really, but can I deliver it sometimes I'm not certain, and you have to take a risk. And you hope with the story as it unfolds that will enable you to be a lot more innovative in the way in which you tell the story. I'll give you an example of that, is that I made the film I made in 2016, The Murder Detectives, was an attempt to go beyond plain and simple access of cops' stories, and I wanted to tell that story as if it was a drama. And my mum actually said to me afterwards, she says, how did you get them to do that? Were they actors? So that was great, because then I succeeded in a different way of fusing documentary into a more dramatic way of storytelling, which is about the style you shoot, the use of music, pace and cutting, and that means then that you just push the boat out and you genre bust rather than doing something that is kind of predictable. I'm more interested in doing the unpredictable and trying to move the genres on a little bit. And I'm not sure what genres are about anyway. I mean, it's all about good stories, it seems to me, whether they're science-based or news and current affairs based, or I don't know, documentary based, are all the same thing for me. It's how do you tell a good story.
Which clearly you're terrible at.
I am. Thank you for that.
Terrible.
I'm grateful.
In terms of being unpredictable, I just wonder, like, you know, because you mentioned during your talk about, like, as a sort of an old-fashioned lefty, you sort of had to develop this
Up to a point. Go on.
develop this sort of like relationship, I guess, with George Bush. Someone who I guess you wouldn't have anticipated having that sort of, well, you said you liked him.
I did.
I wonder if you could go back in time and tell Neil, who was a student here, some of the things that you've done, how do you think he would have responded?
Oh, blimey, he would have been pompous, and even more pompous than I am already. But I would have thought, my word, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. The fact that we became bosom buddies with George Bush is perhaps slightly antithetical. You know, I wouldn't have ever have thought. So thank you for reminding me about my radical past, which in fact says nothing about my current position, I suppose. I've grown up a little bit, but that isn't meant to be in a patronising way. I think that when you're at university, you should be slightly angry, and you should be questioning, and you should be challenging. That's what you're here for.
If not now, when?
And if not now, when? Exactly right.
What was it like the first time you met? Like, you came into contact and sat down and had a chat with George Bush. What was it like for you?
Well, I didn't. I did it all indirectly through the director, and in fact it was done during COVID, and so the crew that we sent across to America had to be a very limited crew, and so what ended up happening was that I was directing the director from the warm embrace of my house. Where was I that time? In London, and it was really about how we were going to prepare for that George Bush interview more than anything else. And similarly for the interview with Dick Cheney, the Vice President, the formidable Dick Cheney. And we... The thing about it is that we only have limited windows with these really big... They give you... and you take. In other words, if they say, I'm going to give you half an hour, that's all you're going to get. But in fact, we'd structured the interview in such a way, and also the relationship the director had with these primary politicians, as I say, George Bush, Dick Cheney, Dick, as we got to know him, Condoleezza Rice, and so on. They all gave us a lot more. And perhaps in the structuring of the interview and what we felt about them and they feeling about us was because, I suppose it was because we weren't American. And they liked the unassuming tea drinking and digestive eating Brits, which made everything a little bit more palatable and didn't make it as threatening as perhaps an American network might have been, of whom might have started with an agenda of which we didn't have.
Can I recommend, if you need anyone that's unassuming and
you'd like to go?
If you don't know, I think we should send David.
Because he eats a lot of digestives.
I eat a lot of digestives.
Yeah, you fill that
I drink
all.
a lot of tea.
Yeah,
You do?
You do.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me.
So,
Yeah.
are you tea or a coffee man?
A cup of tea.
Okay. Well, there you
Just
go.
on a scale of 1 to 10, by the way, how threatened have you been throughout this interview by Crystal and I?
Not very.
No, that's because we're putting you at ease. And,
Thank you.
yeah. So we good at this.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else you'd like to ask me?
I feel like definitely. You go.
I feel like we could ask so many things. I'm really interested, though, in the interviews you had with those American politicians who were in that war room with George Bush.
Yes.
Was there any information you were expecting to get from them, or that you hoped to get from them, or any sort of thing that you wanted that didn't materialise? Or
It's very interesting about George, if I might call him that, is that...
Can you call him that?
You can. Well, no, it's Mr. President.
Oh, okay.
And whereas I wouldn't necessarily use that description if it was Trump. Anyway, but as for George Bush, what was interesting about that was how warm he was, and also how engaged he was, and also how emotional he was. And there was a raw honesty from him that, in fact, I didn't think that I would ever see. And viewers also felt that too, because we were scheduled for 45 minutes and we got over an hour with him, and he was quite willing to answer absolutely anything. George Bush is fickle about his interviews, and in fact can be quite limited and limiting with production companies and interviewers, but not with us. He was engaging, and in fact the bottom line is that people began to like him, and there was the surprise. So he answered your question, is that would I have felt critical about George Bush beforehand? Well, I didn't know him as well as I got to know him after making of this film, and in fact I understood his position as a president about how he would deal with in the midst of a crisis. And you know what? I don't think I could have criticised him at all as an outsider looking in. And how do people deal with crises such as 9/11? And we were perhaps rewarded by that raw honesty from George Bush that gave us that real insight. Similarly with everybody else. And so was I kind of surprised? Did it go beyond my expectations? It did, actually, and I think that there was a reason why, is because some of these participants wanted to get it off their chest.
Confession.
And it was quite a confessional space, if you like, with people that were non-threatening to them, even though we asked some difficult questions. And there were 2 times where we asked whether he had any regrets at all, and in retrospect. And he answered, let history be the judge. And I think that viewers would be the judge.
So you're selling a cathartic experience for this?
I'm selling a therapeutic and cathartic experience, not too dissimilar to the one I'm having now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I would like to know what's the big area? Is there something that you've got a burning desire to
Yep,
take?
I do.
Is it something you can tell us?
No, it's not secret at all. There are 2 things I want to make. And I copyright this for anybody that's listening in my profession. So you can just go away.
That was very politely put.
It was. My passion, and I got the access, it must have been about 25 years ago. But then the BBC started, it was when I was at the BBC, closed me down on it because they ran out of dosh, is that I want to do a film over a year with the Dalai Lama.
Oh, wow, okay.
And just to follow him over a year, particularly the year that he might die, and then to follow this reincarnation into the next Dalai Lama. Look, notwithstanding my perhaps facetiousness in the last part, but I find the Dalai Lama an extraordinarily and interesting person, both politically and I suppose as a religious leader, if not a living God, even though he's not of my faith. But I just find the whole religious experience, the whole rituals, it's just a filmmaker's dream. And I've tried to get the access. I got it once. I tried it again more recently, and I was denied the option. The other area is that I think that there is a real opportunity to do really big innovative filmmaking around climate change. And I think this is the biggest next crisis. Well, it is the crisis that we're currently living in. And I kind of think that you need to have some really very bold ideas about how to do or how to make things on climate change that are not in some way hectoring or in fact worthy, but I think that there is, and I do have an idea which I'm not going to share.
Not on air anyway.
We're not on air anyway. But those are my two passion projects, of which I'll headline, even though I'm not giving a lot of detail on the second one. But also, I think in our current crisis now of world politics, there is some really ripe pieces of investigative journalism to be made. I mean, what a bloody mess that we're in. And that I kind of think that, I mean, I did it in the film I made on the Labour Party, albeit that gave me some very strong criticism, but I can deal with that. But there are some other big political issues in a non-partisan way. But I think the job that I have is to challenge power where you can. And if you do that responsibly, you're not doing it from, as indeed the role is and responsibility of media, is you're not doing it in an inappropriate way.
You know, based on our conversation earlier, where we absolutely didn't suggest that you may have been the person that started the fire at Greg's.
Yes, go on.
You do realise if you ever make a film about the Dalai Lama and during that time period he dies, that this may be used as
evidence against me. Yeah, against my irresponsibility in causing Dalai Lama to. Well, you know what does it matter? He's going to be reincarnated.
That's true. Yeah, cool.
So
I thought you were going to backpedal on that, but
no, I'm
actually
not. I've just doubled down on it. I have doubled down. I apologise. I apologise for that.
Excellent. Well, just throwing it out there as well, we have some excellent environmental scientists here, and we're a real front runner for sustainability at the university.
Well, I'm sure you are. Is that a plug?
But I mean, kind of, but also a collaborative opportunity to go full circle with your alma mater.
Thanks for that. Okay, all right.
We'll talk after.
We'll talk after. Yeah.
I think that probably sums us up, doesn't it? Unless there's anything that you want to use this opportunity to declare. It's your confessional space.
No. Oh well, I suppose there's one other thing is that I just want students, whether it be Hull or anywhere else, but especially Hull because this is where I used to be. I just really hope that they take advantage of the opportunities, not least that they have, but also to hustle within the media industry and media world, which ain't easy to get into. It wasn't easy for me, but don't undersell their own abilities and feel passionate and just go for it. And if there was ever a message I wanted to just share with students here, is that I didn't have it on a silver spoon in my mouth, and I had to hustle as well. And I hope that those students will do exactly the same as me, because I suppose in my own small way I've been quite successful, and I just hope the students here will equally be the same. There you are.
Thanks.
That's great.
Pleasure.
A great message to end on.
Thank you. There you go.
Thanks
you, Neil.
for
coming back, Neil.
Pleasure.
We'd love to have you back again sometime. Just squeeze some more Neil Grant content out of you, because I think it's been really brilliant to do.
Yeah, but I've only touched the surface a little bit.
Oh, well,
Scratch the surface. There's more.
So let's turn this into a Neil Grant the series.
The series in 10 parts.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do some stuff in the courtrooms. We've got a full medical.
Oh, she's selling again. She's selling again.
You know,
You've got to stop that.
And if you do any work with the Dalai Lama, depending on how far that goes, if we can book you in.
You can. Can I just tell you, the chances of me getting the Dalai Lama are about as high as me getting an interview with the Pope. But there you go. And that's another series.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want some kind of creative rights in some
Why?
Things. I feel like I've contributed to it.
You haven't. Okay.
Okay, well, I'd like to say thanks for being here, and it's been
My
a pleasure.
pleasure. My pleasure.
It is your pleasure.
It is mine. Thank you.
Not mine. Thanks.
Thanks, Neil.
There you go. I think that's a cut, really. Thank you very much.
All look good.
Can I go now?
I suppose so.
Yeah. What time is it? What time's my train?